Welcome to the Hungarian Living podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Sabo-Voss. Our goal is to discover, celebrate, and share Hungarian heritage and encourage you to do it too. We'll touch on food, travel, history, music, and language, and share stories from our listeners. We're glad you're here. This is a podcast where we'll encourage you to dig deeper to learn about your Hungarian heritage in a variety of ways. We'll have thought-provoking conversations and share resources. So whether you know a little or a lot about being Hungarian, this is the place to be. Hey, it's Liz, and welcome back to the Hungarian Living podcast. Today, I'm excited to talk with Kinga Tittel. Welcome, Kinga.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the invitation.
Kinga is an author and a tour guide in Budapest, and she has a lot of insight to offer about Budapest. I remember a few years ago when I was in Budapest, my husband and I were in the Castle District with many, many other tourists, and all of a sudden, I heard your voice. And I couldn't believe it, but there you were leading a tour group, and it was so fun to see you out in the wild, you know, in your typical environment, and it was just fun to recognize your voice and hear you out there. But goodness, so many things have changed since that time in Budapest.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, a few years ago and now, if you compare the two, it's like two different planets, two different worlds. But I don't think it's only in Budapest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So over the last several years, you have been busy creating some travel books about Hungary. And one of them is titled Fabulous Budapest. So I have to tell you that that's a fantastic title because Budapest is fabulous. And a friend of mine recommended your book a number of years ago, and we have been in contact since then. So that's been fun for me to be getting to know you over these last several years. But as far as this book goes, I can tell that you really put your heart and soul into this book. And so I wondered if you could explain what prompted you to write a travel book, because, you know, there are quite a few travel books out there. So, you know, you were already entering a market that had, you know, quite a bit of opportunities and options.
Yeah, that's true. And I didn't even realize at the time of starting to write, you know, I didn't know what was going to come out of it. But if I want to go back to the very beginning, I was originally not a tour guide, or I did a tour guiding training as part of my high school years. But with the final exam, I finished it. You know, I completed the exam, and then for many, many years, I never really used it. I graduated I had a business and marketing communications major, and I worked in the corporate field for some years, and I did quite a bit of traveling as well. But then after working for a multinational company, a few years of working there, that's when I had my children, and that's when I went home, you know, on maternity leave. And as I was home with the children, after my first son was born, I was looking for a chance to, you know, just be able to get out and use the English language and mingle with people. So that's how the tour guiding opportunity came about. And I just started to work like once a week, you know, doing one sightseeing tour per week, and then two. And then we had our second child, and the whole thing started again, you know, for just two guiding jobs per week. But I was at home for 5 years as a stay-at-home mom. And by the end of the 5th year, really, I had really become fond of tour guiding. I really got to love the job, and they got to like me. I mean, the company I worked for. And in the meantime, as my maternity leave was coming to an end, I had the option of either going back to the multinational company I had worked for before, or to start a new career as a freelance tour guide. And it was a big debate, but my heart was really pulling me toward, you know, making this big leap of faith, or taking this big leap of faith, if you wish, to become a full-time tour guide, a freelance tour guide, if you wish. And as this was happening, as I started to work more as a tour guide, that's when my kids started to, you know, grow and become a little older. And I was just so anxious to share with them, you know, the stories and legends I knew about the city as we were traveling around the city. My older son especially, he loved using the public transport, you know, taking tram rides and bus rides. And as we were doing the tram rides around the city, I was just telling him and them all kinds of stories about the city and the history and, you know, our figures and all that. So that's how it all started. And I was like, why not put it down? Why not write it down for them? But originally, I wanted to write like a children's book, the Once Upon a Time kind of book with no dates and no names. I wanted to I wanted to make it sound or make it look like a children's book. But as they were growing and as I went more and more into this work, I realized that, maybe I can talk about the very beginnings of our history, Hungarian history and all that without names and dates. But after a certain point, there has to be names and dates and all that. So I had to modify the genre of the book, if you wish. And so I put like 5 years of work into this when I finally had a manuscript. And I approached, well, I didn't start with the smallest company. I went to the biggest publishing house in Hungary. I said, why not give it a try? They're not only publishing books, but they also have the whole book shop network franchise around the country. So I decided to approach Libri, which is the largest publishing group of Hungary, and they were just ready to publish it. So I walked in, from out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't know anybody.
How fun!
Yeah, and as I'm finding out now, that's usually not how it happens. So I mean, since then I've found out about so many of my friends and acquaintances. They've been wanting to be published, and it's just not happening. So I just guess I was at the right time at the right place. So it took another year and a half or so before the book was published, but it was originally published in Hungarian, and now I'm answering your question. We're getting there now. The original title was Mesélő Budapest, which basically says, well, a literal translation would be Storytelling Budapest or something like that. And it was published in November 2016, and it was a big hit. I mean, it came out at the end of November. By Christmas, the first print run was sold out.
Wow.
So that was like in 5 weeks. It was on the top of the list, and so second edition had to come out, and the third and the fourth. We're now at the 7th edition, more than 20,000 copies. We won several awards, like librarians awards and readership awards and things like that, the Children's Books Award. So it was really very, very well received. So that's what prompted my publisher to maybe come up with an English version, especially because I work with English groups mainly, and I know exactly what I think. I know very much what the English speakers would like to read about Budapest and Hungary. So I try to put in all the answers to the most frequently asked questions that I usually get from my guests also. So it's not a direct translation between the Hungarian and the English version. The English one is like 80 pages longer than the Hungarian because it's got all the extra content for which is tailored specifically for the English-speaking world.
Okay. Wow. So, Budapest is a city that you have grown to love over the years. Obviously, you've kind of talked a little bit about that, but and you know it quite well. But what is one of those things that you consider a treasure in Budapest?
One thing, that's a hard one, Liz.
Well, okay,
there's so
a couple
much.
of things.
There's so much. I mean, I think the one thing I really love about Budapest is that it's so, I don't know if this is the right word, multi-layered or multifaceted. I love the fact that it's got so many layers of history and art history even in the city. I mean, you find everything here from the Roman ruins, until the blocks of flats from the communist period. And just this covers like 2,000 years of history.
Right.
So this is one thing. I mean, I like the architecture in the city. I know that it's not for everybody, but I just love looking at the facades. I love looking at the details. Even nowadays, if I take a tram ride or if I walk on the streets of Budapest, I can't just walk without raising my eyes, up to the facades of the buildings. And every day I'm finding new details. I have my favorite places for different seasons, like for spring, for fall. I know exactly where I can find, the beautiful changing colored, the colors, the changing leaves or the blossoming trees. So I have my favorite secret spots, not so secret spots in the city also. But again, the architecture is always there and the Danube is always there and it's always different colored, every time the river, it's quiet or not so quiet, it's murky or blue or gray. I mean, it's just really, really a new adventure every day.
Yeah, it's changing all the time, from what's the weather's doing and the sun and the colors and the sky. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about Fabulous Budapest. Did you ever think to have it in English to begin with, or that was just something that came later?
No, it was just something that came later because,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it was just so, I mean, it looked such a logical decision, for the publisher too, because
Hmm.
at that time, when the first book was published in Hungary in 2016, and then a year or two later, 2017, 18, Budapest was just flooded with tourists. I mean, there were so many tourists, and from all over the world, a lot of them being English speakers, obviously. And I
Hmm.
worked with them. I work mainly with Americans and Brits and Australians, and you're right. There are many other travel guides, but I mean, I told my publisher, I said, I can. I mean, I could offer this book to my guests, and when I do my tours, we're passing by some bookstores, and I could point it out, and all that. So, of course, this is not the only way for the book to be sold. It has to excel on its own, But the original
Sure.
title was so successful that I'm finding out, and I get a lot of letters from readers that my original readers, the ones who bought the Hungarian book, now they're buying the English book. They're sending them out to the UK, to the US, to their family, in these countries, friends. We have so many people now who live in the UK. I mean,
Hmm.
who moved there in the past 8-10 years, and many of them have my books now, and they keep spreading it to their Hungarian friends in the UK and the States. So it's just spreading and spreading. And the English one is also quite successful, not as successful as the Hungarian, but I think that's just the way it is. I mean, it was published in Hungary in the first
Hmm.
place, but I think it has a lot of content really, which the other travel guidebooks don't have. I mean, we have a section there on famous Hungarians, Nobel Prize winners, famous inventions, a history overview on the whole country. Budapest as a popular movie filming location. There are so many movies which were filmed in Budapest. A lot of people don't realize that we had all the A category Hollywood stars in Hungary in the past decade or so. And
Hmm.
so you can revisit Budapest in many of the movies. Sometimes Budapest is disguised as other cities, so it's not
Yes.
always featured as Budapest, but it doesn't change the fact that it appears in many of the Hollywood movies.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Now, quick question. Is it available in other languages too, or is it just in Hungarian and English?
It's going to be just Hungarian and English. It came up, that the idea came up to have it maybe in Italian or German. But after doing a little bit of market research, my publisher said that they don't see the guarantee that they would sell in enough
Enough.
copies. So maybe it's not going to be a break even for a long time. So that's why they decided to have it just in Hungarian and English. But
Okay.
for now, I think it's a good start, and of course we have to have the tourists to come back to
Sure.
be able to buy the English one in the first place, let alone the German or Italian one. So now it's a whole
Right.
different story, as we mentioned it already in the very beginning.
Yes, I would say everything has now changed just
Yes.
a bit here. So even though there isn't a lot of tourism travel happening right now, are there some good reasons to purchase the book to read it anyway?
I think so. I mean, if you want to know about the Hungarian culture, what makes us, what we are, who we are, it's got a lot of, I mean, what we call Hungaricums. I don't
Hmm.
know if you're familiar with the term. I'm sure you, Liz, are, but maybe not all the listeners are. So very special, unique Hungarian products which only we have, or which are originally from Hungary. And I think you can really understand a lot about our history, especially the 45 years of communism, which left its mark in the country, in the mindset of the people, in the architecture, the way our language was shaped, our cuisine, and of course the different sides of Hungary. But I also talk about the bathing culture, how it all came about, the
Hmm.
125 years of Turkish rule, and what left. I mean, what's left of that? We talk about I talk about the Austrian period, the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy, and also there's a section in the beginning on the different waves of immigration. When people left Hungary, because it also happened in different waves. So for people to understand why there are so many Hungarians living outside our borders, because the population of Hungary is just a little bit under 10 million. as I'm sure you know, but there are about 14, 15 million Hungarians living all around the world. So where is that 4 or 5 million difference? That's also in our book. In my book. So just, topics like that, in addition to the big sites and the most important things to see in the city. We have a section on the Jewish Budapest, the synagogue, famous Hungarian Jews, and some interesting stories about them. So that's also in there.
So it sounds incredibly thorough. And of course, I've read through the book too. So it's not like I'm not familiar with it, and we do sell it. But just as a explanation, I mean, it's a very, very well done, just very fun to read, engaging book.
Thank you.
So what other projects has this book led to? You weren't really even planning on writing a book, and then you write this book, and then it's wildly successful, and then you translate it into English, and then what else has come from there?
Yeah, so it was a very, very good start, and I was almost hesitant, to continue it, because it was just such a beautiful start that I was sure that this success could not be repeated again. And that's what my publisher said too. He said, usually that's how it happens. If you have one unusual success, then usually if you continue, the second book or the third one cannot be as successful. That's just how it goes, or so I'm told. But they did want to continue, and I also did want to continue, because I felt like there's more that I want to write about, especially because in the first book, I mean, there were some constraints. The volume itself, it couldn't be, bigger than what it was. I mean, we didn't want to come up with a huge encyclopedia type of book. So there were certain things that had to be left out. And I was just, I mean, my heart was breaking when we had to leave certain things out. And I was like, okay, we have to cut this, edit this out. And I'm like, oh, I put so much research into this, now we have to edit it out. So that's how the idea came to start a pocketbook series, actually. So not the big one. I mean, if you've seen the book, the original book, it's a bigger book. It's not like a coffee table book. It's not an album. It is a book, but it's a bigger, thicker book. So that's why we started having these pocketbooks. And the first one came out. The first one focused on the castle district. We're still in Budapest. So on the Buda side, the beautiful castle district area, which was published in Hungarian, and simultaneously it was published in English. So it came out in both languages. So as I finished with the manuscript, it was immediately given to a Native American lady, and she translated it. She speaks Hungarian, so she right away translated it into Hungarian. So the two books came out at the same time: the English, The Fabulous Buda Castle, and A Várnegyed Titkai, Castles of the Secrets of the Castle District. That was the Hungarian title. The English one, we put Fabulous Buda Castle on the book. So that was the first pocket book. And then just a year after that, in fact, last year in August, in the beautiful year 2020, when we were already in the middle of the coronavirus, my book on the Danube came out. So that was the second book in the pocket book series. Now, because this was already the coronavirus year, no tourists, in the city. Budapest was just completely empty and, vacant and silent. I think for obvious reasons, my publisher decided to not come up with the English version just yet. I mean, as soon as things come back to normal, we will have it published in English too, but not just yet. So it's definitely an option, for the time when life gets back to normal. So I have the book on the Danube, which is a really interesting book. It's more like a time travel. We go back to the turn of the 19th, 20th century. The Danube book has a lot of black and white photographs in it from the turn of the century, and just a lot of interesting excerpts from newspapers and things like that. So I think it's a bit different, but I think very interesting. We talk about long forgotten jobs in connection with the river, from gold panning to fishing, and just all different things. So that one came out, and the new one is about to come out in a month or two. So again, the Danube one came out last August, and now it's just the beginning of 2021. And I hope in a month or two, by April, the latest, I think a new book will be out on the market. So that's what I've been working on recently.
Okay, well, wonderful. I'm so glad. I mean, I'm glad you were able to use your time not doing tours and, this challenging time where we're trying to figure out what we're going to do, as especially if you're in tourism. But
Yes.
you have the opportunity to continue something that you started even before that even happened. So you just could hunker down and do some work on the books, and
I feel very blessed to be able to do that. I mean, I see so many of my colleagues, they're just so clueless and helpless as to what to do and, what to expect for the future. And I just feel so incredibly lucky and blessed to be able to do this, really, because that's what I enjoy doing more than anything. And in the past years, I only had time to do writing in the off season, in the winter months. But now,
right.
Not that I don't miss my tours and my guests, because I miss them terribly, but I also do enjoy the fact that I can put more time into doing research and writing and, coming up with new ideas for future books, because that's what we're also working on with Libri. We have a long-term commitment to work together. So I have at least 3 other titles on my table right now. We just have to figure out which one will be next, and then the next and the next one. So I think even if I don't have any tours coming in for the next 2-3 years, I'll be okay. I will not be bored.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you know how to keep yourself busy.
Yes, sure. I do. And I love it. I have to tell you, I never realized before that this is what I love doing, but that's really, I think I found my place in this world, if I can say that. I mean, this gives me the sense of satisfaction more than anything else. So I'm really.
Well, that's wonderful, because that's, it's a tough time, and a lot of people are struggling.
Yes.
But it's nice to hear that there are people that this situation has allowed them to see what they need to be about and what drives them.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think it's a very special situation that I'm in. And again, there are risks involved, just like, in anything else, because up until now, I had two legs, I don't know how to say it in English. I mean, guiding was one thing, writing was another thing. So now it's like one leg is out. I'm only on one other leg right now, the writing. And I'm not saying that if tourism comes back, I will not go back, because I do want to go back, but I would work less. I mean, my ideal workload would be, I think, maybe 2 tours a week. That would be wonderful, to be able to do 2 tours and meet with the people and be able to, give them the experience of a lifetime in Budapest, but at the same time, at the end of the day, I can go home and continue writing, being at home with my family. So this would be a beautiful balance.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Kinga, last question. You aren't actually from Budapest. Is that right? I mean, and you're actually not even from the current borderline of Hungary. So let's talk about that a little bit.
That is correct, Liz. That is correct. I was born in Transylvania, which I'm sure you all know is now part of Romania, but it wasn't always so. It was part of Hungary up until the First World War. So I am a Hungarian. I don't have any Romanian blood in my vein. I'm Hungarian, but I was born in Marosvásárhely, or Târgu Mureș in its Romanian name. That's where my parents lived, and we lived there. We lived in Transylvania until I was 8 years old. In 1983 was when we moved back to the motherland, to Hungary, because my parents realized this were the darkest years of communism, as I'm sure you all know, under the Ceausescu regime. And my father realized that for us being Hungarian minorities, and he was a doctor, so that was another thing, which didn't really help. And he was against the whole communist regime, so he wouldn't want to become a secret police agent or working for the communist regime. So he was kind of pushed in the background, and he just realized that if we stayed in Romania, for us children who were 3, we would have no future in Romania. So that's why they decided to come to Hungary. We didn't do it illegally, so it wasn't like an illegal crossing of borders. We had family here, so this was like an official family unification, so to speak. So it took them more than a year to get the necessary paperwork and all that. But we came with all our furniture, with a big train car, and we arrived in Hungary on the 1st of May, 1983. All the flags were up in the buildings, because 1st of May is Labor Day, international, or at least Hungarian Labor Day. So to me, to an 8-year-old girl, it looked like they were all, waiting for us to arrive at the Eastern Railway Station at Keleti Pályaudvar with all the flags up. So that was a day I will never forget. So my life in Hungary started in 1983, and my father got a job in the country, so not in Budapest. So that's where he became a doctor. It wasn't far from Budapest, but I went to school there, and I was only 14 years old when I moved to Budapest, when I went to high school, basically. So that's when my life in Budapest started at the age of 14.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, I look forward to what's next. And hopefully there will be some things in English as far as the books go, but I know that we will talk again on the podcast too. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been super fun to visit with you. I miss not getting to see you at least, once a year.
I miss you, Liz. Yes. I miss that. It would be great to have you, and I look forward to it.
So if we can't visit Budapest, we might as well learn about it and dream longingly for the day that we will return. So if there's something you want Kinga to talk about with regards to Budapest, be sure to send me an email at podcast@hungarianliving.com, and we will answer it when she is back on the podcast. Don't forget, be sure to check the show notes for the titles of the books we talked about today at hungarianliving.com. And I look forward to having you on the podcast again, Kinga.
Me too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
Hungarian Living is a division of Magyar Marketing, the Hungarian store, where you can find meaningful gifts with Hungarian style. Check us out at magyarmarketing.com. And special thanks to Stephen Cicek and the Animal Cannibals for the show music. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Hungarian Living, please subscribe and share this podcast with your favorite Hungarian. Check out our show notes for links to resources mentioned in this episode. If you have a question or comment, email us at podcast@hungarianliving.com. We'll catch you next time.